Okay, I think we're going to get started here this morning. Thank you all for coming. My name is Laura Dulce. I'm the Executive Director of the Kennebunk-Kennebunkport-Arundel Chamber. And I have inadvertently dressed as the Hamburglar today for our nice talk with Detective Stephen Borst, who I so appreciate being here this morning. I know that you're all very interested in this topic. We actually have 48 of you online so far and more coming. Clearly, all of us are kind of in uncharted territory now, and I think that information such as what Steve will offer us this morning will be hugely valuable. Right now, I have all of you on mute, just so we don't end up with the inevitable dogs barking, kids yelling, all the rest. As we go on, I would ask you to please put your questions in the chat. I know there are going to be quite a few questions as we kind of have this discussion, but I'll unmute you guys one at a time when Steve is done and we can have a fuller discussion. So with that said, take it away, Steve.
Morning, everybody. So I got approached by Ashley over at Allison's, and she just wanted to know if we had couple words of wisdom, more or less, about folks who are dealing with irate or challenging customers, regardless of what kind of business you have. And so I had done some homework last night. I just want to give you a little bit about the standing governor's order and what that means and what that looks like for us as far as an enforcement standpoint. And then we can talk about some de-escalation techniques if you or your staff do have folks that come into your place of business and you know, create a disturbance or don't want to follow the rules and guidelines that have been set out. So the governor's order that we have in place right now was dated April 29th, and I believe it's due to expire on May 29th, I think, the end of the month. There's been some talk about it may be extended, it may be lessened or you know, lightened up a little bit. The purpose of it is the protection of public health and safety, and those continuing public safety measures should be going through the end of the month. It's kind of like a two-prong approach. Number one being social distancing, which is 6 feet or more between people. And the other one is the cloth face coverings. The face coverings, the rule, if you will, or the order is consistent with the CDC guidelines, and that they must be worn in public settings when physical distancing is difficult to maintain. So I'm sure everybody has seen this kind of a wide range of how people are choosing to address this. But we've seen the people who are by themselves and driving in their car with their windows up and they've had their mask on. Then you have other people who may be out walking and they're in a group of, you know, 6 or 7 people and shoulder to shoulder and nobody has a mask on. So the rule of thumb is if social distancing is difficult to maintain for whatever time period you're together, you should be wearing a face mask. Is it a law? It is not a law that you need to be wearing a face mask. It's part of the standing governor's order. The other definition I kind of wanted to let people know about was public settings. Public settings, examples of that would be like grocery stores, healthcare facilities, certain outdoor spaces, public transportation. I don't think our trolleys are running, and I don't think they're going to be running this year. But so, like if you're on the trolley, things like that. I also know that Downeaster has really scaled back the number of trains that they're running. But if you happen to find yourself on let's say the Downeaster for whatever reason, that would be another example of a public setting. The exceptions to wearing the mask. This is where it kind of gets a little gray. The governor's order says children under 2 years of age or anyone who has trouble breathing or a medical related condition doesn't have to wear the mask in public. Now, the sticky point is those folks who are claiming to have some medical issue that will prevent them from wearing the mask are not required to provide any sort of documentation. And as Laura and I kind of talked about earlier, you really can't ask them about it either due to the HIPAA regulations. But the one gray area that I did want to touch base on real quick is for our business owners. An employer may require such documentation of its employees in accordance with state and federal law. And I think the spirit behind that part of it is if you have, let's say you had an employee and they needed, you as the employer needed to make a reasonable accommodation for a medical condition for them. Let's say, they couldn't stand for more than 2 hours and they have a doctor's note for that. You as the employer would need to take reasonable accommodations for that employee. It's kind of the same spirit here, is that an employee may ask for documentation or a doctor's note from the employee. Some of the violations, so I was telling Laura when we first started this, they started a new code in our computer for if somebody in the public calls in to dispatch and they want to report what they feel is a violation. They started a new code in our computer for it. It's called a VGO, or Violation of Governor's Order. Laura had asked, and I did a little research. Since the start of the month, since the start of May, we've received 17 of these complaints from the public. And those could range anywhere from, I drove by Rogers Pond and I saw people fishing and it was clearly marked that it was supposed to be closed. We would go in there and address that issue. If they didn't want to leave, then, after being warned, it becomes a criminal trespass issue. We had an occasion where somebody in town made a hair appointment, and I believe it was a male. He went in to get his hair done, and the establishment said, part of the safeguards that we have in place here are our staff are wearing gloves and face masks, and our customers need to wear face masks while they're in here. This particular gentleman felt that he didn't have to wear a mask, and so he left. And that's his prerogative. He can leave the establishment. But then he calls the police and wants us to go down there and force the business owner to let him be a customer without the mask. And that's not something that the police department's going to do. We had another one where, plenty of them, where people call in and they may see a group of people. I'll give you an example. Up at the gym, Sperling, I think they had an outdoor class, and somebody called up and said, there's all these people outside and they're exercising together. They shouldn't be. They're not within 6 feet. Oh, they're within 6 feet and nobody's wearing a mask. The exception there in the governor's orders, if gym classes have to be 10 or less people, much like if you were to have a cookout, they want you to limit the amount of people there to 10 or more, 10 or less rather. So we've had a bunch of these complaints in town, and we try to address them always with education rather than enforcement. There are a lot of loopholes, to be honest with you. I think they try to make it easy for everybody to understand and obey and kind of comply with. But to my knowledge, we haven't actually charged anybody. It's always been in some education, and people have been pretty receptive about it. On Mother's Day, I happened to be down at the beach. We had a 4-hour detail down there because the beach and Beach Avenue and the sidewalks weren't open yet. And despite the fact that we had plenty of signage and roadblocks on both ends of the beach, people still found their way around the roadblocks, and they want to see the beach. So a little bit of education, and we had, the vast majority of the people in compliance. So let's see. Anything from you, Laura, right now? No.
All good.
Okay. So people say, what is the police department's position if we find people who are in violation? Obviously, like I said, we would prefer education over enforcement anytime. We're looking for voluntary compliance, but if people really want to push the issue, I have seen other municipalities and other police departments kind of backed into a corner, and then they rely on the Class E crime, which is arrestable, up to $1,000 fine and up to 6 months in jail. It's not something that I don't think, it's something that I don't think any of us want to do. We don't want to be pushed to that issue, and I'm glad to say here in Kennebunk, we certainly haven't been pushed to that end. But there are other places I'm sure people see on the nightly news all over the nation, people who just don't want to go along with the program, and they feel like if they're going to get sick, that that's their prerogative. They can get sick. But police departments are the ones tasked with enforcing this governor's order. So Another question that was asked to me about the governor's order is kind of sort of what are businesses, what's the onus on the business? Do they have to let people in? Do they have to serve people? In the bigger picture, do they have to be the target, if you will, of irate customers who don't like the governor's order? And the answer to that is, I always say it's the same as, a good rule of thumb would be, it's the same as no shoes, no shirt, no service. It could be the same thing. No mask, no service. It's certainly within your right as a business owner that you can deny service to people. And if you have like Laura and I talked about, signage is a big thing. So let people coming into your establishment know what's expected of them. Both masks and social distancing. A lot of it is how it's worded. I think you get a little more with honey than you do with vinegar. So if you could say, like, we're wearing masks and practicing social distancing, we hope that you'll do the same. But people don't like change, and I think everybody's getting a little, the patience are getting worn a little bit thin right now. But just know that if you do, just trust me when I say that if somebody wants to call in and complain about your business, they will call and complain about your business. We take calls all the time from people that they don't like this at this business, or they don't like that at that business. But inevitably, almost every single time, it's because the business owners have safeguards in place, in accordance with the governor's order and the CDC guidelines. So that's what I have about the governor's order. Do you want to take over the next section, Laura, or any questions?
Yep. I mean, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about de-escalation techniques. I know that's something that police officers are trained in, but I suspect that your average server or business owner probably has not up until now faced too much of that. And I think that a lot of our businesses are concerned, if I have someone show up at the door and, refuses to put his mask on as he's being seated, or, says, I'm not giving you my contact information for the tracing restaurants are forced to do, or the lodgings. How can you offer some tips for people who have never done that training like you have, for how they handle that?
Sure. So de-escalation techniques, big thing nowadays. Kind of equates to, on the police side of things, is crisis intervention techniques, or CIT training. Here at the police department, every officer has been through a 40-hour specialized CIT training, and that is kind of sort of tailored towards dealing with people with mental health crisis. But if you think about it from a business perspective, whether you or one of your employees are dealing with an irate person at the front of the house, or that wants to come in and you don't want them to come in for whatever reason, it kind of sort of carries over. Those people are in crisis, if you will, and you don't want to create a scene. You want to kind of address the issue the best you can, because also it has your business name on it. And in the day of Yelp and TripAdvisor and everything, where nobody really wants to get a bad review out there, especially if they're trying to do the right thing and keep people safe. So there is an actual school called the Force Science Institute, and this school is designed to train police officers for dealing with people in crisis and getting them to de-escalate using the most basic skills that people have, and the majority of that is verbal. When I went to CIT training, we had a hands-on scenario where you were dealing with somebody who they had like actors, and they were actually had mental health diagnoses, and you as the police officer had to go into this situation not knowing anything, just that they were in crisis. So you're walking into this and you're trying to de-escalate it because somebody's up high and somebody's trying to stay down low as far as the emotions go, and trying to work through that. How it kind of sort of carries over to the private side is business owners, right? Everybody's offering a service of some type, whether it's services or goods or restaurants, or it could be anything. The police department, we offer services. And a lot of times, real life situations come up, and it can be stressful for people, especially people who are on vacation. We all rely on our vacationers and our tourists to get our businesses down the road, but they also have an obligation to keep people safe when they're in their business. So I did a little bit of homework, and the most basic ones that we can come up with is listen. I think as a whole, people kind of just want to be heard. And if you were to have, let's say, an irate customer at the front door of your establishment, and they have a problem, let's call it problem X. They think it's unfair. They don't like the policy. They're on vacation. They don't think they should have to abide by it. The number one thing I think you can do is just listen, because those people, generally, they kind of just want their opinions heard, and they want you to listen to what they're trying to tell you, why they feel the way they feel. So there's a big part of it is just listening. And as long as the behavior that they're exhibiting, whether it's raised voices or being very animated or trying to create a scene, as long as that's not posing a safety or security risk to you or your other patrons or your staff, just let them vent. Let them vent a little bit, and hopefully getting it off their chest will bring them down to a little bit better state of like equilibrium, where they're a little bit easier to deal with. So my number one suggestion would be just listen. Everybody, when you're managers, everybody's going to be dealing with different situations and customer issues. That's why you guys are managers. But I was thinking about it a lot when I was talking with Ashley from Allison's. A lot of the businesses, especially the restaurants, the people that you have in the very front of the house are oftentimes younger. Maybe they're summer help, and they shouldn't be tasked with dealing with issues like this. If you have a big issue like this, it's going to create a disruption in your business. I think that should be something that automatically goes to management, and see if management can handle it using some of these techniques. And if not, if some people are unreasonable, by all means, rely on the police department, and we can come down and mediate those things. So first and foremost, just listen. These are your customers. You want them to have a good experience in your establishment, and you want them to return. So just kind of listen to them. The second one I came up with was acknowledge. When these people come forward and they're griping about a particular issue that they don't feel is right or it's not fair, acknowledge their issue as legitimate. That's the legitimacy of why they're feeling the way they're feeling, and why they're acting the way they're acting. It's all usually based on emotion and not a specific behavior. You want the angry person to realize that being angry isn't the issue or the problem. The problem is it's the way that they're choosing to act out about it, in your establishment. So acknowledge that, listen, I understand you might not like this order. This is the standing order that we're all dealing with, and kind of give them a little bit of education, why your particular business is handling things a certain way. I think a little bit of knowledge goes a long way on the customer end of things. The other one I came up with was agree. If a person comes to you with a particular problem and there's a little bit of truth to their problem, go ahead and agree with them. It's helpful for them to find some sort of truth in what they're saying or what they're feeling, and that you agree with it. I'm not saying that you have to back down or you have to change how you do business in your place just because of one particular customer situation. But if there's a little bit of agreement there, and you let them know that you understand where they're coming from, I think that goes a long way. Let them know about, you feel that it's unfair that you have to wear a mask when you're in our establishment. Think about how we feel. We're in this with you. We've never had to wear masks. We've never had to social distance. We've never had to come up with new floor plans for our customers or traffic flows inside our businesses. So we're all in this together. I understand you're upset, but we have to work, together on this. Apologize. Again, that kind of goes with agree a little bit, where give them some value in how they're feeling, and apologize. It's not to say that they're always in the right and you have to be in the wrong, but if you say, I'm sorry the situation has you so frustrated, that goes a long way. Apologizing lets them know that you're empathetic to what they're going through. and that they may cease to direct their anger towards you or your staff, and they understand that you're trying to help. So I understand that you can't bend the rules. You can't, if somebody comes up and says, well, I'm not wearing a mask, or I'm not going to sit there, you can't just acquiesce to them and say, okay, do what you want. If you apologize to them, listen, I'm sorry, you can't sit at this particular table, but I can offer you this table, or, you can't go to that particular section of the store right now because it's not open, or whatever the case may be. Giving them a little bit of knowledge and apologizing for what they can't do, but letting them know what they can do goes a long way. Choices and consequences. This is a lot, kind of sort of goes back to police work a little bit. And the choices and consequences kind of boils down to, if you continue to do this, then you're going to force me to do that. So a good example might be if somebody comes in and says, I'm not giving you my name for your guest register. If that's something that it's an in-house policy and you absolutely have to get it, then say, if you're not going to give me your name, then I'm going to have to ask you to leave. But always kind of make it, one action brings about the other action. If you had a particular incident where a customer was refusing to leave, by all means, call the police department. We would go down. You'd probably hear us say something like, sir, oh, ma'am, I'm giving you the warning that you have to leave the establishment. If you don't, then I'm going to have to do this. So it might sound something like, sir, if you don't leave, the manager has asked you to leave. I'm telling you, you need to leave. And if you don't, you're going to be charged with criminal trespass, or you may be arrested. Always show them that they kind of have the ball in their court, and whatever happens next is kind of up to them. But also be mindful that in this day and age, cell phone cameras are everywhere. And I remember recently there was an incident, and I think it was in Ohio or Idaho. It was in the middle of the country. And much like we had at Mother's Beach, this particular playground had their jungle gym taped off. It wasn't supposed to be used. It was a nice day. A bunch of mothers got together, brought their kids down to this playground. The management from this particular park called the police and said, I know that you guys came down here and taped all this stuff off and that the park is closed. We have, I don't remember the number, it might have been like 10 parents down here with their kids. The police went down. They did a great job of explaining why they were there, the steps that they needed to take to ensure people's safety, and that having everybody in such close proximity was against the governor's order. Nobody was wearing masks. And I'm sorry, but the park is closed and you're going to have to leave. This one person in the group took it upon themselves to kind of be the spokesman for the group. And of course, everybody had their cell phone cameras out. And the police took all these de-escalation techniques into effect. It was textbook. And I remember the sergeant said, ma'am, if you don't leave right now, I'm going to have to arrest you. Thinking that might be a little bit of a motivator, that I don't want to be arrested in front of my child. Instead, this particular mother pretty much begged the police. She said, okay, then go ahead and arrest me. And she turned around, she was put in handcuffs, and she was arrested. Yes, was she arrested in front of her child? Yes. Is that a situation that anybody wants to be in? No. But the police did a fantastic job. And they actually even had the park superintendent there to kind of give them this, this is why we had to call the police. Then the police show up. This is why we had to take the steps we did. And then somebody ended up getting arrested. I think the police did a great job trying to do education first, telling them about the enforcement, apologizing that the park was closed, and being empathetic as to why the parents wanted to be there with their kids in the first place. But her choice of staying there, her choice of begging to be arrested, kind of led about the ultimate consequence of her going to jail. So the last one was suggestibility. It's kind of like word games or semantics, but in the police side of things, we have a class that a lot of us have been to. It's called verbal judo. And it's not necessarily about what you say, but it's about how you say it. And that's kind of what I was mentioning earlier about signage. Maybe it's not necessarily the instructions on the sign, but it's the tone or the kind of the message that sign gives off. So one of the things I found was when individuals are highly agitated, they may be less likely to respond to commands and orders. So a lot of times we use phrases like, would you mind? Can I please ask that you do X, Y, Z? Another one that I learned a lot in that verbal judo class was, I would like to think that we can work together and then deal with whatever the issue may be. It shows that you're willing to listen to the other person, that you want to find a solution, that you understand their position. And, when you say work together to solve a problem, that's kind of like the basic tenor of community policing, working with the public and solving problems. So those are the most basic de-escalation techniques. But just remember, the only thing that you control, you yourself control, is yourself and the decisions that you make for you, your staff, and your business, and how you address that situation. But it's these people that we deal with on a daily basis, both as the police and as shop owners and as business folks, that they're the ones that control the ultimate say of how they act and react to certain situations. Make sense?
Absolutely.
Yep.
I have a couple of questions,
Yep.
Steve. So if, say I'm just, a server, say I'm working a front desk and I'm checking someone in and they just get belligerent, and when do I, or when does a business kind of create a protocol? I know a lot of businesses right now are trying to do that. When do I bring a manager in? When does it escalate to the point where I should call the police? And do I tell the person I'm calling the police? Or is that going to make them even...
Right. No, to answer your last question first, I think, yes, I think you should tell them that you're going to call the police. People who are here on vacation or doing business at a local establishment, they don't want usually to have contact with the police. And that, to me, that is like listen, I've tried to work out this issue with you and we're at a stalemate. I'm going to call the police and they're going to come down here and mediate this. As far as when you call the police, I think that's more of a management issue. Like I said earlier, I don't think the younger generation, like guys and girls who are, hostesses and hosts and maybe, people that the public is going to come into contact with first, they shouldn't be the ones tasked with dealing with irate customers. That's definitely a management call there. But I don't know, did I answer your question? I would say that it's up to the individual business about how they choose to run it and when they're going to call. And then I would also agree that, yes, if you're pushed to the point where you need to call the police for some assistance, by all means, let them know that we're on the way.
So is that like a step back and I hear what you're saying, let me go get my manager?
Yeah, listen, I've tried to take steps A, B, and C with you. I'm sorry that you don't agree with that. That's how we're running the store. Those are the guidelines we have in place. And if you're not going to leave, then I'm going to ask that you call. That I'm going to let you know that we just called the police and they're going to come down and address it.
Okay, Ashley, I think you had a question.
I was just going to say, so we've talked to our staff, basically treating it the same as you would an alcohol situation.
Yeah.
Like a belligerent person or an unreasonable person is kind of the same as a drunk person. So try to find the most reasonable person in the group. They can usually help you, and they'll usually try to step in a little bit if you can reason with them somewhat. But once it starts affecting other guests, that's usually when we would contact the police or go further with it.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah. Steve, I know today people are really concerned with, distance and the physical stuff. We've heard of instances where people... Oh. Okay. Spit at or touched or things like that. Does that kind of escalate things as far as,
So anything that you just described, spitting, touching, pushing, all those things would constitute an assault. Assault is physical contact or unwanted physical contact. So like, someone pushes one of your employees.
This is so stupid.
If somebody lays hands on one of your employees, by all means, call us. We would come down and address that. But any sort of physical contact, that's totally off limits.
Yep. Sorry, had a little
Okay.
issue there.
No problem.
Wow. Is this something that that you've had so far? I know that there have been some concerns from some of the stores that people are, you know, kind of coming right in on the mask and things like that. Any issue that you've heard so far about people refusing to leave establishments?
No, not here in town. I can tell you last weekend, personally, I was at Cumberland Farms in Sanford, and they have a vestibule, double doors, and in between the double doors, they had some signage. Very well written, very concise signage about we're only allowed to have 5 patrons in the store at a time. Please be patient, and please have your face covering on, or something to that effect. It was very, very simple, very succinct, 2 simple things: 5 people in the store and wear a mask. I was in line. I think I was the second one back. The woman in front of me was wearing her mask. I had my mask on. A patron comes in and he cuts the line, and he just thinks he's going to walk into the store. And I have to tell you, the clerk did a fantastic job. She was very firm with him, sir. I need you to step back into the vestibule. We're only allowed 5 people in at a time. And something as quick as that, 2 to 3 seconds of education and information. He's like, oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that. Probably because he didn't take the time to read the signage, but and he did. He stopped, turned around, got back in line. So a little bit of education goes a long way, I think. And when she pointed out the signage, and he saw that, oh, wait a minute, these other people in front of me are doing the same thing, it was a little more reasonable for him. So I think that first initial contact with an employee, she did a fantastic job last week. But to say, have we had anybody get physical with any of our stores in town, or shop owners or employees? No, we haven't had anything like that.
The one thing I have heard about a little bit is people from kind of out of state with the license plates and stuff
Yep.
like that being confronted locally. Any
Sure.
thoughts on that? I mean, I do know that a lot of our residents who have been here for 6 months out of the year sometimes have been confronted, and any way to handle that, or any kind
Yep.
of
It's a great question, and I think on the surface, right, when if somebody wanted to know where I live, right, a good way of figuring that out would be where is my car registered. So I think we're maybe a little hypersensitive to it because we are a vacation community and we have so many tourists in the summer that we see all these out-of-state plates. That's an easy, identifiable way to figure it out. So I understand that people think, wait a minute, that guy's got New York plates on his car. New York was a hot spot. They shouldn't be here right now. Or if they are here, they're going to quarantine for 14 days. And people start playing over in their head all these possible scenarios about what could happen if this person was from away, was from a hot spot, had pre-existing conditions, whatever the case may be. What they also need to take into consideration, and this is where it gets sticky because I don't think people automatically do this, stop and ask yourself, what other reasonable explanation could there be for this person to have New York plates on their car? And I'll give you a perfect example. A good friend of mine here in town, lives here in town, has been here for years, has a company car. All his company cars are registered in the state of Rhode Island. He has been working from home since this pandemic started. He hasn't been to any of his locations that he manages. So he's doing everything he should. It just so happens that the car that he drives has Rhode Island plates on it. And he said it's almost a daily thing where somebody's confronting him, making snide comments, whatever. I think it's a bad way to open the door into an argument that doesn't need to happen. Just because somebody has a certain license plate on their car doesn't mean that they're any more susceptible to getting you sick or themselves being sick. So just slow down a little bit. We do hear a lot about that, about the license plate game, but there can always be another rationale reason why it is that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I've got another question. Hold on. And please, if anyone has questions, just let us know. Put it in the chat and we'll go from there. Ashley?
Oh, I thought you were going to read it. I didn't realize that meant I had to read it. If someone says they have a health reason for not wearing a mask, can we still refuse service? I know we can't ask what the health reason is.
Yes. Yep.
Oh.
So we just had this debate earlier about, so we had a business here in town. The business didn't call us. A patron went to this business and was told, sir or madam, everybody that's at our shop today has to be wearing a mask. The person said, well, I'm not wearing a mask because I have a pre-existing condition. Never said what the condition was, nor are they obligated to say what the condition is. And they were asked to leave, which they did. That person then in turn calls the police department and wants us to go to this establishment and say, we'll let this person shop at your establishment because they have this pre-existing condition. The slippery slope is that anybody can say they have a pre-existing condition. The onus is not on that person to produce documentation, nor can you ask for documentation. So it's kind of it doesn't hold a lot of weight. But to answer your question, I think that you as a business owner can certainly prevent or decide that you don't want to offer service to a particular customer. I would equate it to the same person who comes in and drinks too much. You can say, that's it, you're done. I want you to pay your tab and I want you to leave. Kind of along the same thing. You're not obligated to serve everybody that comes to your establishment for either a service or a good or something like that. Did I answer your question?
Looks like it. Elizabeth, you have a question that you wanted to ask?
Yes, back to those VGO calls. I'm sure there's tons of them coming in about out-of-state license plates.
Yep.
I've spoken with other innkeepers who have told me they've actually had people pull into their parking lot, their driveway, looking around. So how do the police typically respond to that if somebody says, oh, I saw, a New Hampshire plate in such and such person's driveway?
Well, I think much in the same way that I just did, kind of educate the caller that there could be other legitimate reasons why that person's license plate is the way it is. And if they're not happy with that particular answer, the officer would have, the ability to go down there and maybe see if they could find the registered owner or whoever's driving this particular vehicle and find out what it is. The hard part there is, let's say it is somebody from, you say New Hampshire, let's say it's somebody from Concord, New Hampshire, and they come to Kennebunk Beach for the weekend. Mm-hmm. When they leave, they're supposed to quarantine for 14 days. Or if we have a Mainer that leaves, or conversely, if somebody from out of state comes here or we go somewhere and then return, they're supposed to quarantine for 14 days. That's extremely hard to enforce. How would you ever know or keep tabs on somebody for 14 days?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, a little bit of education. I think it kind of goes back to the first part about making it so readily identifiable as that person has out-of-state plates. We're here in Maine, therefore it must automatically be a violation.
Yeah. I know I read something yesterday in the email that I'm sure a lot of summer businesses that are opening they may have workers, say from New Hampshire, for example, right, that are coming up here to work. So they're going to be parked around town. So there may be a lot more of that. Like, would it make sense for a worker from another state to just put a sign in the back of their car that says employee? Or
I have seen them, essential worker or something like that. Last night on the news, they interviewed some folks in the Augusta area that are on a construction site. This particular company, they go all around the region, all over New England doing new construction. And their workers were, a lot of them from out of state. The topic was, are those people, should they be allowed to come to work if they're from out of state? The governor's order says essential workers, if you're working in an essential business, yes, you should be able to. The signage, somebody just puts a sign in their car, essential worker or something to that effect. A lot of times that would just kind of waylay any concerns from the person who wants to call in their complaint. Make sense?
Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome. Got some sirens for effect back there, Steve. Stephanie, you had a question about face coverings.
Yeah, I kind of wondered, how are out-of-staters learning that Maine is kind of requiring that. I know I've seen like the turnpike signs about 14-day quarantine, but is there any kind of more mass ways than once they get into town that we're requiring it, that they're seeing it kind of in an official way?
I think the two-pronged approach of social distancing and face coverings, that's pretty much universal. That's just not a main thing. That goes countrywide. So for somebody to say I didn't know about social distancing or I didn't know about face coverings is kind of a far leap. But maybe there are some people that are like that. A little bit of education, like you said, when you come over the turnpike, they have the signboards out that indicate it, and they're at X number of mile markers all the way up the turnpike. But we don't, to my knowledge, we don't have our signboards at the beach or anything that say face coverings required or social distancing. I think ours say keep moving because they want to prevent groups from congregating. So to answer your question, is there a formal way for people to know that other than it kind of sort of being widely known, if you will, about that two-pronged approach? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yes.
So I also think that the sign, as we talked about before, Steve, really helps. So if you see that sign right when you're in, I included in the chat the link to the Kennebunkport Promise sign, which is actually kind of a cute little lobster way of telling you. I think the sirens have gotten to my house now, Steve. Just a nice way of saying we're doing this to take care of you, help us take care of everyone. And the one sign also has a little box so you could fill in your phone number for the store. I know what a lot of the hospitality folks are doing is saying, if you can't wear a mask, if you absolutely have a medical reason, we've made a promise to our employees that we're not going to just have you walking around the store or wherever, but we're going to make an accommodation for you. We're going to meet you before hours. We're going to meet you after hours. We're going to do curbside for you and let you pick up. So I think that's another great way for businesses to kind of continue that customer service piece, accommodate the people that have health issues that are maybe not able to do that and yet still provide those services. So
I think it sends a great message to the customer that the store is willing to go the extra mile for its consumers.
Right. Al, you have a question as well about masks?
Yes, I'm with Kennebunk Savings Bank, and we have some frontline customer-facing staff members in our branches who cannot wear masks due to pre-existing conditions. Okay. How do you balance that when you're asking customers to wear masks and look over and see somebody, an employee who's not, and say, well, they're not wearing a mask, and if they're in that mindset, they're going to make an issue out of it?
Right. Well, I mean, can they make? Yeah, sure. Anybody can make an issue out of anything, right? If they feel that, when they go into the bank and they're wearing a mask, that their particular teller, they too should be wearing a mask. Well, that might be true, but the other side of the coin that people need to realize is that that person may have a pre-existing condition or some other reason why they can't be wearing a mask. So I would say, much like Laura said about how the businesses kind of go the extra mile, to offer certain things or added things to their consumers so that they know that they're working, to address this particular issue. Maybe that person who's on the front line and can't wear a mask, maybe you reassign them to a particular task where they're not dealing face-to-face with the public. Or instead of the masks, now you have plexiglass barriers between your staff and your patrons. The other part of that is if the patron does feel so strongly that they don't want to do business there because with this particular teller, then have them get back in line and go to another teller that does have a mask on. They do have some options. It's not an all or nothing. It's not, I don't like this, therefore you need to change it. There's a lot of things that you can do to work with the customers to make everybody find that happy medium for everybody.
And I think to Steve's point, they have some really great small portable, not small, but the plexiglass screens that can go on with that person's shift and then leave with them if need be, that are, relatively inexpensive to buy.
Yeah, we are furnishing our teller stations with those and our work desks.
Yeah. Another thing, it just popped into my head. I live in Alfred, and I know at the post office they have a sign, and it's a little wordy, so you have to kind of sort of take it all in. But at the post office in Alfred, it says if you're standing on this carpet in front of the the window, you're not 6 feet away from the clerk. So it's kind of a good reminder. Yes, they have the plexiglass. Yes, they're wearing masks. I'm wearing a mask. But the other kind of visual cue or the visual aid, if you will, is that they had a mat in front of the window, and that was a good, easy 6 feet. So if you think about it, if your customer comes in and they don't want to deal with the person behind the counter who's not wearing a mask, are they 6 feet or more away? Because then the mask is only really takes the place if you can't maintain that social distance. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Steve, for your final question of the day, Blake had to leave, but he wanted me to ask if concealed carry people are exempt from wearing a mask.
The answer to that is no, and I think I know Blake's motivation to ask that question. So yeah, no, you can still carry even if you wear a mask. Good one, Blake.
Okay.
That's the question of the day.
Yeah, notice he asked that and then ran, okay?
That's
So, okay, well, I think that's all of our questions, and I can't thank you enough, Steve,
problem.
for being
Glad to
here
help.
this morning. Huge help.
Be patient. We'll get through it.
Yep, and we know that I'm sure if we have other questions or things that come up, the Kennebunk Police Department will be there for us. So
Yep,
thank you very
absolutely.
much.
Anytime. Okay, take care, guys. Thank
Stay
you.
safe, everyone.